Yeah, yeah, man, Marcus Visionary. Watch on, man. And you don't know the real general.
Welcome to the Marcus Visionary podcast number 6. And today I'm here with a person who is a legendary producer out of the Toronto jungle DnB scene. We've been involved with the music for over 30 years together. This man has developed a sound which is uniquely his own. He's built an incredible network of fans. He's a true tastemaker. I want to welcome Rumbleton to the podcast. What's up, Rumbleton?
What's up, Marcus? Thank you for having me. Thank you for that introduction. I'm going to get out of here with half of that. But seriously, thank you for having me on.
Bless, man. Yeah. For everyone, this is our second time. Last time we were looking like Darth Vader. Our lighting was a little bit off. So we got a brand new podcast room, which the lighting didn't come in time, but you know what? I made the best of it. And we're going to do this again because we have to do it proper because you know what? Rumble is somebody who's making waves and someone that I personally admire with this sound that you've developed that is so uniquely your own. And you've carved out a space for yourself. I think no one sounds like you, even when they do touch dub and breaks. You know what I mean? I make a lot of stuff with dub and breaks. And if you listen, you know, even say, I'm sure we've sampled the same things, but the way that you interpret them and the way that you flip them is so uniquely you and interesting. And I mean, we sound like night and day, even though we're kind of in the same vein, right? And that's what I love about music production, and I love about what you've created. I know that it's been years in the making. First of all, how you doing, and what have you been up to lately?
I'm doing good, man. You know, anytime it's August in Canada here, you know, it's always good. We don't get too many warm months here, so I'm loving this right now. But just been cracking on with the beats, just on a daily beat mission.
Yeah, that's an understatement because you just had some massive releases, which we're going to get to later, you know. But you just had a Drumcraft on the weekend, which we were talking about off camera. How was it? What went down?
Yeah, it was good. It was fun. Yeah, Karen played her first set at Drumcraft.
Yes.
Played a couple sets out here, but this was their first one to the Drumcraft crowd, and I'd say it was a success for sure. Yeah, it sounded great. You know, Vox played amazing set. She doesn't play often enough. We need to get her.
Excellent.
More often.
Yeah, man. New blood always, right?
I mean, you know, that Vox, I wouldn't call her new blood.
No, I just meant to the Drumcraft family. Yeah.
As far as
I know Vox has been around for many years, and yeah.
Played at the first Drumcraft. I think it was before it was called Drumcraft, but she played at one of the first jams that Karen had here in recent times.
Yes.
And, I would love to get her out more often. You know, big up Vox.
Yes, big up Karen Soul Pride, one of the masterminds behind Drumcraft. Drumcraft is literally one of the flagship companies that's been carrying the jungle drum and bass sound and the breakbeat sound forward in Toronto, and just really has developed a crowd and a vibe of its own. Also, too, you guys are operating out of Basement 254, which is probably one of my favorite, if not my favorite, small club because it has a massive reggae sound system in there. Who did that original sound system that's in there right now?
I believe that sound system belongs to the Higher Heights Hi-Fi.
Yeah, man, serious little club. Okay, so we're gonna take it right back. Where were you born, and where did you grow up?
Yeah, so I was born here in Canada, born in Scarborough, way back in 1976.
Yeah, man. What part of Scarborough were you from? Because I'm from Scarborough. I'm from Malvern.
So when I was born, my parents lived right around Victoria Park and Finch area, Cherokee Boulevard.
Okay. Yeah, I know the area.
And then we moved out to Mississauga for a couple of years. My dad had a job out there, but a couple of years later, we moved back here to Scarborough, and we lived up north end, up by like Brimley and Steeles area.
Where did you go to school for high school, let's say?
Agincourt.
Agincourt. Okay, cool. I went to Mowat Collegiate. They used to call it Mo White because it was in that time. Now it's Mo Black, which is funny.
Yeah, my Agincourt wasn't really actually that close to me, but I was in French immersion, so that was the French immersion school.
Excellent. So you could speak French?
I've forgotten most of it, but yeah. Technically, yeah.
So for all you people around the world, not everybody in Canada speaks French. It's mainly just from Montreal and Quebec and some people in Ontario, but a very small percentage, you know? So I guess because, you know, we're really focusing on the music here and we're going to cut right to the chase. When did you first hear music and what was the sound that caught your ear?
Well, I'll say my dad always had records around the house. He had this, I guess you'd call it like a ottoman. And so it looked like a footrest from the outside. It had a nice padded top, but the top opened up and it was basically like, you know, big crate of records. Okay. So that's, you know, some of my earliest childhood memories are, you know, messing with some of those records, getting in trouble for that.
What was some of the stuff that your dad used to listen to and was there anything in that collection that you were vibing with?
I mean, he had a pretty broad collection. Between him and my mom, they had everything from, you know, Chuck Berry to Meatloaf. It was still pretty much about 2 crates worth. So it wasn't that many records, but it was a concentrated stack.
So what were you hearing at school? Because I know, for people that don't know, Scarborough was like a melting pot of culture. You grew up in the infancy of dance music and sound system culture as well, and the birth of hip hop and so on. So what was going on at high school, and were you really like tuned in to what was happening at that time?
Yeah, in high school, my whole time in high school, I was one of the music heads. But it was even before that. I was, you know, I'd heard Run DMC, you know, an album which was Raising Hell, I believe it was called. That I had that tape, and I was that tape really got me. I listened to that tape a lot, and you know, I had no idea they were black. I heard a lot of the heavy metal guitars. Like I really wasn't aware of what's going on in hip hop. And you know what I mean? I just heard a lot of heavy metal and a lot of like, that's the first time I heard cussing in a song, you know?
Yeah.
Motherfuckers can't mess with us.
Right.
You could say that on a song. You know, I was jamming to that tape pretty hard when I would have been about 88 or so.
Yeah, man. Like that's when I heard NWA cursing the way they did. That was a whole other level for me. But yeah, 88 was great because you had the whole Public Enemy movement as well. And
the next album that really got me was Public Enemy Takes a Nation of Millions.
Yeah.
That was the turning point, really. You know,
life-changing.
I'll say before that, when I was like a kid, someone, I might have been maybe 5 or 6 years old. This would have been maybe 82 or something like that, or 83. Someone gave me a record for birthday or Christmas, and it was called Breakdance. And it was like a K-Tel, Polytel breakdance record.
Yeah.
Alex and the City Crew. And it's the one that come with the poster.
I know the one. Some of them even had the cardboard for the breakdancing, right? Inside of it.
Said the poster, but
okay.
That was pretty much my one record as a kid. That was my one record. And to look back at that track listing now, it kind of explains a lot.
Man. Africa Bambaataa back then, right?
Yeah, one tune on there, Grandmaster Flash and the Furious Five. And it's a one tune that has him mixing 5 tunes within it.
Yeah.
I mean, that's a total precursor to
what was that, Flash on the Wheels of Steel or something like that? I think I remember that tune. Yeah. I mean, it was amazing because some of the early records he was making, it was actually just him, cutting the breaks back and forth like they did at parties, which is incredible, and they just managed to capture that on vinyl. Yeah,
I mean, at one point he does his little Apache back and forth, and I was thinking, you know what, if you sample that Apache, you're sampling his actual record. But I'm sure you've gone through 100 of those records, but
yeah, man. So back then, radio was really big. We didn't have pirate radio over here in Toronto, but we had community radio, which was university and college radio for people that don't know. Did the music move you to the point where you were like starting to seek it out?
The way I got into music, like radio, as far as radio goes, was 102.1 Friday nights, Saturday nights, Chris Shepherd, Deadly Headley. That was the spot. But I wasn't really all that much into dance music per se before that. I was a hip hop head, and I was very much in that say no to crack, drugs ain't cool era. Yeah. And so when raving came around, raving got popular, I said, you must be mad, I'm not going to that.
Devil music, right? Yeah.
But through doing other missions, out in Scarborough, late at night, let's say not quite legal missions, I would tune on the radio of the car to cool your nerves, so if cops go past you or whatever, you're all good.
Yeah.
And I literally come into Deadly Headley by accident that way. I had no idea what it was. He was playing some of the deep stuff. He was, quite on par with what was going on in England at the time, in London. So
yeah,
that was an eye opener for me. And I started putting in cassettes, press record before I go out at the night, and then come home later. You have a cassette filled up with the beats that you've just been listening to out there.
Yeah, Headley, we got to big up Deadly Headley. Club Max was one of his residencies. But I actually, the first time I heard Rebel MC and like sort of proto jungle was through Headley, and I remember hearing it and just thinking to myself, wow. Like I remember he played Humanity on there by Rebel MC, Congo Natty, for people that don't know.
He'd do the part of the show called the Reggae Link Up. And he would, he'd be playing techno or whatever current music, and then he'd just switch and he would go, here's some foundation reggae, and he would, often tell you where it comes from or why it's a foundation tune. It was great at, blending the two cultures together, which would ultimately later be jungle, really.
Right. So, so you're listening to Headley. You're living in Scarborough. For what people might not know, so back then in the late '80s and early '90s, hip hop, R&B, reggae, dancehall, pretty much ran the city. Like because this is pre-EDM, it's sort of like house was actually being played at those parties because everything was being played at those parties. Like if you went to a club night at whether it's Spectrum or Copa or any of these clubs, you heard a segment of everything. So it was back when dance music was sort of all under one roof. Reggae, because I know dub music is a really big part of your foundation. We crept in there, and I know how big hip hop was in the city of Toronto through like Ron Nelson and Fantastic Voyage program and DJ X and Mastermind and DJ Power and all these people. But the reggae thing, were you vibing to reggae at that time, or did you find that a little later?
Yeah, I found that a little bit later. I mean, I was always intrigued by dub. I'd heard some things that were described as dub. Actually, I had a cassette from Ecstatic that was called Rubber Dub. I'm not sure if that was the name of the tape or the DJ, because I'd never heard of him before or since, or her, or but it was a whole lot of like old school dub, like 70s reggae mixed with some current trip hop type stuff, and it really got me digging hard about, dub. I was like, what is dub? What is dub? Dub. That was in the days when online started coming around. So I was constantly searching.
Where were you buying your hip hop music in Scarborough at that time?
There was two shops up in Scarborough. It was really one shop. They just moved location and changed name. It was called Beats.
I remember Beats. Okay.
Middlefield and McNichol.
Okay.
And then they moved over to Woodside Square Mall for a while, and then they were called Grooves there, if I'm not mistaken. I might have the names backwards, but that was in the early 90s too. That was right around the same time Play a Record popped up. I would go down to Play a Record on weekends or if I had time. But that place, Beats and Grooves, they were so much closer to me that I was definitely going there for a lot of my hip hop and even house. They had a lot of house music there too.
Right. So did you start picking up some house as well at that time and around when you were getting the hip hop stuff?
When I found Public Enemy, I started, buying Public Enemy records. Started realizing that 12-inch singles have all the different mixes on it, and instrumentals and, versions and so forth. So that, I started buying a lot of Public Enemy records. Pretty much what I had was a bunch of Public Enemy records. I had Eric B. and Rakim records.
Yeah.
I had, a couple of EPMD records. That was it. And this was, going to high school. A couple other guys who knew that I had records said, hey, they had a DJ crew called Tremor Sound.
Okay.
Why don't you join us?
Because you had the beats, so they were like, let's get you on board.
Yeah, so joined up with them, and then they already had things kind of in motion. So bookings were already happening. We were playing weddings and like banquets and school dances and all these various kinds of little things. And so yeah, started hanging out at the record store, and we'd all, we DJs would have our little conference, and we'd be like, what do we need? We have enough hip hop, we need more. What we need more is more house. We need, so I started buying more house, and yeah, that's pretty much how that started.
What was some of the early house that you liked? Do you remember some of the artists?
I remember seeing Elias live. I played Do Follow Me live.
Oh wow!
And to this day is still an anthem. I remember seeing
such a big tune. Yeah.
We used to hit up the all ages clubs before we were drinking age, and they would usually play that kind of stuff. But
yeah.
I mean, yeah, like Plez, I Can't Stop is always pretty much tunes from when I first heard that.
So very much like that early classic house period. And then also too, you had this bleed at the time. I think a lot of people forget about the whole hip house thing with like Fast Eddie and the Jungle Brothers did like I'll House You. So that was an amazing period. There was this little bleed where like you had like really danceable hip hop. It's funny, a lot of people forget about that time where there was just one dance music. I remember you'd go in and like the 12-inch of EPMD, like, just be busting up dances, like, you know what I mean? But at the same time, we'd be playing Bang Bang Your Mind, the Plez, I Can't Stop and all that stuff, and work it to the bone, you know what I mean? And then flip it over right into Life Is What You Make It, which is that early dance hall, you know what I mean? So it was a great time in Toronto, man. And it was kind of magical because it was like one of the last times that dance music, that many genres lived under one roof. Very few parties are like that now. A lot of things are very genre specific. Even a lot of like the soca is just soca, and the reggae parties are just reggae, and like, you know what I mean? There's the odd party where you can hear a little mix, but it's not like how it was back then. It was really the birth of everything, wasn't it?
Yeah, true.
Yeah, man. Okay, so we're gonna take it up to the rave thing. Obviously, you're listening to Chris Sheppard, because I know Headley. That's the really interesting thing. As much as he was playing hip hop, he's playing reggae. He's playing like early rave and techno and proto jungle. So tell us about that early period with Chris Sheppard and how you started getting introduced to the rave scene.
Just started, buying records from being in this, in Tremor Sound's DJ crew. Started spending, more and more time at record shops, and that's where in those times, this was pre-internet, so that's where you would really get exposed to different kind of music that you would never ever hear on radio or anywhere else. And so like my introduction to hardcore was basically through Deadly Headley and through record shops, more so than through raves. I was still like, no, you can't get me to go to a rave.
Yeah.
But, yeah, so I guess my introduction to raving would have been closer to, would have been more like mid 93-ish.
Yeah.
So, I mean, I was well into the music already at that point. But
and there was some wicked raves back then, though. So 93 was a good year to come in.
Right. So, so I heard like Ecstatic, the cassettes from Ecstatic were like, those were like nuggets of gold to get one of those,
Yeah.
To me, especially the red sticker era, that was like, and one time, it was about mid 93. We were hanging out. My friend's older brother says, "You guys want to go to a rave?" And we kind of caved. We were like, "All right, fuck it, let's go." So he took us down. It was Catch 22.
Yeah.
So Dr. No was playing. The bass bins were just actually shaking the whole building. And this was when the speed of Jungle, the tempo had just gone up a little bit. Between that and the bass, it was this was another, seriously
life changer.
Exactly. I never really looked back like at that point. And I tracked down as many Dr. No tapes as I could from there on. That led me straight to Delirium.
Okay. Yes. We'll get into Delirium. But first of all, for those that don't know, Dr. No was a British expat. He used to partner with a guy named Malik X, who was, I guess, really instrumental in sort of starting the whole rave scene with Exodus, which was with Mark Oliver and Sean L., Danny Donnelly, and Danny Henry. They started Exodus. They're a bunch of Scottish and British guys. And then Dr. No teamed up with a company called Chemistry, which was Alex of London. And in the early days, we would follow Dr. No around. So if he played at Nitrous, we would go there because he would sometimes be the only hardcore jungle set. So we'd go there, watch Dr. No, talk to him, have a little chat after, and then it just went back into like progressive house or techno or Rotterdam, because back then all the rave sounds lived under one roof, right? Until companies like Delirium and Infinity and Psychosis and stuff like that, right? So gotta big up Dr. No. I know it's a segue out of the Rumbleton thing, but he had such a major influence on us, like from his fashion to his music, you know what I mean? And his presence on the radio to the raves, you know? So
massive influence, yeah.
So big up Mary and Joan from Catch 22, Magic Mondays. This was a regular Monday night. There was a couple other people involved, but those two ladies were like super dedicated to the music, and I guess they never really get their props as some of the early promoters for the music. That you know, when artists would pass through, they would have them down, and they had everyone through Magic Mondays. So big up Magic Mondays.
I did play for Magic Mondays. I played for Joan eventually at some few years down the line after that. Big up Joan, yeah, for sure.
Wicked, man. So you went to Magic Mondays, you experienced that bass rumble, and then you started getting interested in going to some of the raves, which led you to Delirium. Yeah. Proud card-carrying member, right?
Oh, yeah. You can see that it's reflecting too much. There we go.
Yeah. Tell people what was special about those times for you when you went to those raves.
It's hard to put your finger on it, but it's something about the atmosphere. It was that, you know what I mean? I'd like to call it the golden era, but I'm sure everyone
That's a different one.
has their own different golden era. But yeah, but I mean, so for example, the Meeting of the Minds Delirium, which was at the turns out that I didn't know at the time, but it's a Masonic temple.
Yes.
Well, I was I believe 17 at the time, and the party was on the spring equinox. I didn't know that either, but that's the kind of you know, mystical stuff that happened around Delirium. You know what I mean? I didn't find that out until years later, but
yeah,
that those are just the weird alignments that happened with Delirium, and what Delirium was really about is, Jungle PhD. Medicine Muffin.
Yes.
Okay. Hard Crew.
Yep.
All right. Dr. No. Rough.
Yeah.
Self. That's what Delirium really was, because it was really the music. That was the difference.
Yeah.
Other raves, great. Other raves you could even say might have been even better as far as presentation or something like that. But Delirium had the sound system.
Yeah.
DJs, selectors, and the sound system, and you don't need to. Once you have those two in place, you don't need to frig around with the rest.
Yeah, it was bare bones. You know, for those that don't know how we ended up starting Delirium, was because there was this mix of sounds and people were still playing house and techno. We wanted to hear a night of all jungle. It was like, who plays all jungle? And people were like, well, at the time I was going to Psychosis, and you had Jungle PhD and Dr. No and Roughneck, right? So I knew about them, but everyone was like, you need to find Medicine Muffin. And I met him one night at Psychosis, and it was just rally up the team of guys with all great record collections, you know, and we didn't used to do time slots. We would just play back to back a lot of the times. Sometimes down the line, you want to hear certain records, you let Roughneck go. So taking it right back to Delirium, Roughneck was one of these guys that we would let play because we knew he had certain records, because he was ordering his records directly from England. So we would get, you know, he would have his Fist to Fist in the Redskin collection. He'd have all the Busy Bee stuff, all the Brain stuff. And so we used to let him roll. Rick, obviously, you know what I mean, working at the shops, and they all had all the Ibizas, all the limited E, you know what I mean? Reinforced used to get, if there was 4 cuts on an EP, all 4 cuts are getting played.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
You know what I mean? And I think that's what made Delirium unique. We weren't afraid to, like, if we had 4-track EP here and a 4-track EP here, we love Reinforced so much. We're playing both cuts, then we're playing both cuts, then we're flipping it over, playing the inside cut. You know what I mean? And even down to we loved it so much we'd play the hip hop cuts that Digo and Mark would make. So it was a great time, man. And like, you know, obviously Delirium, even though it was like my company, it had such a big influence on me as well, because it's like I was there as a raver, as an attendee as well. You know, some serious magic there. And I mean, you guys brought the vibes. You know what I mean? We had Rumbleton there. We had Jesta in the building. We had Lush. You know what I mean? Like, you guys were in it. So it was a combination of the crowd, and it was just bare bones. It's really what Drumcraft is now. You know, bare bones, all about the music. You know, big sound system. So you know, you're coming to Delirium. You're starting to go out to raves. When did the DJing start to take off? And like, did you start to get involved in playing in the scene? And
like, I was already in a DJ crew, and we were playing, like I said, other, you know, high school dances and banquets, weddings, all those kind of things. And yeah, there started to, alongside the rave scene, there became like a bit of a suburban house party scene, at least up in the neighborhood in Scarborough. And there was some house parties that were absolutely off the, you know, they were just really good parties. Like, yeah, some of the most fun had. And that was, you know, playing at those where you walk in and you don't know what the setup is. The tables could be down at your knees. That who knows what kind of decks they got. Yeah, that's, you know, training grounds time. So
house parties in Scarborough, like, a lot of people don't know, like, they're super famous from the reggae and the hip hop. I mean, I attended some, like, people turned their house into a club, pretty much.
Totally, yeah. You know, so there was that, and then there was we knew, like, I'm watching the same guys who I just listed earlier, yourself, and the rest of the guys, you know, Medicine Muffin, Jungle PhD, Hard Crew, Roughneck, Doctor. I'm not like, I got to get really good before I take one of these guys' jobs, because the night is only so long. There's only so many DJs on a night.
Yeah.
And so, you know what I mean? Me alongside a few other DJs who had that same kind of sentiment, we basically kind of formed a group more or less out of solidarity in the fact that we were kind of the outsiders, and we were getting booked for plain reasons, is that there was selectors that were there in the spots that were, you know, killing it. It's not that we were doing something wrong. It's just that the people there doing it were already doing it proper. There was no, you know, you don't, any broke, don't fix it. So
yeah,
that was basically where Bottom Line came about. So Bottom Line crew was a big, broad crew. I don't even know all the members of the crew. Like, it was a big raving crew that stretched mostly between Toronto and London, Ontario. Mm-hmm. But members all over. There was, the members, I'm pretty sure it's in the hundreds. And
wow.
So, and at one point we realized, well, we have enough crew. Let's throw our own events, you know. And so that was Danny. I'm not taking credit for that, but I say we. They were the ones who started it. Danny started it with Joel Whitey. Byron was involved in the beginnings of that too. And there was, so it was myself, Ruckus, Illfingers, Webster, it was AKA Symbiont nowadays, and MC Delirious D, MC Lucky, and there was also Derail, can't forget Derail.
Yeah. So
that was the crew. We had our own crew of DJs, and we started throwing our own parties, and we were Delirium heads. We were Delirium fans at that point. And as you know, we threw our first party was even called Delirious Productions. It was a black and white flyer. You played at it. We booked you for most of the Bottom Line.
Yeah, I remember the Bottom Line parties. I was living above Numb at one point, and Ruckus came in, and I was in the shop one day, and he said to me, he's like, "Listen, we're trying to like do our thing. Do you have any advice?" Right? And you know what I mean? And I was just like, "No, you guys are doing your thing." And all it says, you know, I basically said, just don't forget about us. You know what I mean? And that's how it ended up. He ended up booking, like, you know, me and Medicine Muffin and all the guys from before, because at that point I was getting booked to play at other raves, so I started to slow down with Delirium because there was some business side of it with some of the guys that just got sticky, and it kind of made me lose a little bit of the love for the original company the way that it was supposed to be. So as I was getting a lot of work playing at other raves, I started to veer out of Delirium, right? And then started Junglist Movement, right? That's a whole other thing. But Okay, so you've got Bottom Line Crew. I remember the parties. You know what I mean? It was like a whole new wave of people. And this is like what, 94, 95 around there?
No, this was after that. This would have been like tail end of '96.
Okay. Yeah.
I think
See, and that makes sense because that's when I was winding down Delirium for me.
'7 we had our a weekly going, a weekly Friday night going, and that was fun. That did really well, and we had pretty much every DJ in the city passed through there at one point, and from outskirts too. We had all the Bottom Line affiliates from London, guys like Everfresh, Capital J, Silo, and all them guys.
Yeah. So this is an interesting time because we touched on this before a little bit. This was the transition from jungle, our beloved jungle, to drum and bass. And I think for people that weren't there, from 91 to the end of 95 was a very unique vibe and energy at events that was like associated with the first wave of rave that was like post acid house, you know? And I remember when a lot of the guys were coming over, like Shy FX, and because obviously there was no internet, the only way that we could get information about what was happening was through a lot of the artists. And I remember like Stevie Hyper coming over, and we were junglists. We, you know, at this point, to be a junglist is your life. You know, we were so deeply immersed in it. And when we heard that the music was going to be changing from jungle to drum and bass, we were crushed. We were like, what's going on? The funny thing about that transition is everyone was really button-lipped about what was actually taking place, because what was happening in England wasn't happening here, right? And so how did you take it in 96 when you started hearing that there was going to be this transition? And then also, too, the music was starting to sound significantly different between 96 and 97. How were you dealing with that transition?
Like I didn't really learn of most of the London events around that time. I didn't learn of those until later. Mm-hmm. So to me, it was just like the music was changing, and it seems like drum and bass or jungle rather came about so fast in the first place. Anyways, it really moved through a lot of phases, just between say 92 and 93, even just before it even got to 94. I could think of a whole bunch of phases. To me, there was that, I don't know what to call it. It was like a paranoia phase. Tunes like Johnny.
93,
Scott.
man. 93 Dark Side was...
Right, but well, I mean, there was dark. There was a lot of dark business going on, anyways. But through a whole bunch of phases of like that, which seemed to last very short periods of time and then move on. So to me, it was always fast. I just figured that's what it was. It was just like, well, we're moving on. I know a lot of, by 95, a lot of the breaks were just being pounded to death, like just beaten, just battered. And it's like, yeah, you know what? I love the break, but yeah.
Mm-hmm. I think the biggest thing for me that I started to notice was labels I loved started to disappear. Like, you didn't see Redskins anymore. You didn't see Fist to Fist. You didn't see Kemet. You didn't see Third Party. And these labels were so instrumental. There was no more Tom and Jerry. Like Reinforced was still there, but it was evolving. So yeah, for me, it was like a point of depression. I remember when Kenny came over, and he was just like, obviously Kenny won the Jungle Sound Clash. He was the jungle guy, and he was like, we talk about it, and it was like a state of depression. You know what I mean? Because it was like, yeah, the thing we loved was changing. You know what I mean? But I mean, that's like anything. Everything has to evolve, right?
Like, so you say the state of depression. So I was in a state of denial, basically. I was just like, that's some of the, I'm just gonna keep looking harder to find the jungle tunes. Like, I guess I didn't have my finger that hard on the pulse to know that certain labels were actually shut down. I was just going to the record shop hoping they would release more. So yeah, I was in a state of denial. I was still picking out only the tunes that were, still in that
vein,
school of thought. We never called it old school back then, but now it's truly is the old school of thought. It's completely different.
I guess I was in a state of denial as well because we were, the English guys would come over and they'd be like, "You guys are still on this jungle thing, man." You know what I mean? Like they couldn't believe that some of the records that we were still playing, and even to the point where they would come over and have to play more jungly. I was like you in denial in that I was seeking out anything that was on Playas or because they kept there's certain labels that kind of kept the jungle going, whether it was Dope Dragon or Full Cycle or V, you know what I mean? And so those are the labels that I gravitated to. And then you still had metalheads having like Dillinger and Digital, and those artists didn't change. So they still had their camp of jungle producers, you know what I mean? I was just really curious to know, because I know how you are, and it's a really interesting question for me because a lot of people don't realize how big that change was. Because basically it was almost like a new chapter in Rave. Because come 96 now, you've got like metalheads becoming a lot more of a dominant thing. And then I guess innovation started to happen with like a tech step sound creeping in. These are things that weren't there before. So like when the techie sound started to come in, that was something new, you know?
Yeah. So I think I saw jungle / drum and bass as like a finished form. That is a form of music. So to me, the different styles of drum and bass that came along after that, I considered them, trends, and just didn't follow them.
Yeah. I mean, I think that's a big part of why, even during the pandemic and what's happened over the last few years with like yourself and so many artists who kind of came out of that hardcore jungle period have said, you know what? This is its own form of music, and there was nothing wrong with the OG sound. So we're going to pick that baton up and continue it. You know what I mean? Like, let's explore it more, because, a lot of people stopped making that sound because they were like, okay, well, we need to move on and we need to carve out new paths. But a lot of people that I've talked to said, hey, there's a lot more to be explored. There's more songs to be made, because I think the thing too that distinguishes jungle, that period of jungle, from like, say instrumental drum and bass, is like a lot of it were like fully finished songs. You know what I mean? In music, you can always craft a song with, like the whole idea of the breaks and the pads and the musicality of jungle. I think it's amazing, and I'm so happy. For me, that's what I've chosen to make and go forward with. You know what I mean? I know that's for you. We're living in this like land of drum and bass. This takes me to a question that I was going to ask later on. What do you think of the current state of drum and bass as we live in an underground, very unseen section of it in a way? Like, do you feel sometimes that this thing is this massive thing that's at festivals and it's just drum and bass, and then we're part of it in this very small capacity? Like, what's your feeling about the current state of drum and bass?
Yeah, so like I don't have any bad feelings towards it. All music has its place and time, and has its right to exist. I mean, to me, drum and bass goes so much farther back than the average person realize. Even a lot of the heads in the business probably don't realize, or at least I don't see them talk about how far back drum and bass goes. So what we have now is what I think is a genre that's called bass. And that's the thing that's kind of taken off the stadium thing, and then it's more often called D&B than drum and bass. But anyways, that's if you look into sound system, the term drum and bass is or was anyways loosely interchangeable with the term dub and the term version. I could give examples of dozens of records from the 70s that reggae records. You flip them over, it says drum and bass version on the flip side, drum and bass version. Yeah. So that's a term that has literally been in existence in sound system circles for a long time. And at some point, you could find it even in hip hop records. A lot of hip hop records, I've got Eric B. and Rakim records that you flip over. It doesn't say instrumental, it says dub. Yeah. And I've got a lot of hardcore records, even from the pre-jungle era, from well before when they started using the term jungle. And a lot of them have, you flip it over, it has, like a vocal version, drum and bass version. A lot of times you see drum and bass version. It's been there. If you look for it, you find it there. It's been there. But what I find that it truly means is a mixing style. It's not a genre unto itself, or at least in the way that's used that way. It's a mixing style.
A set of principles that are, I find with dub, especially for me, dub is such a big part of what I do, whether I'm making like 140 or jungle or drum and bass. Like it's that set of principles of that, the way that they used to mix and add effects to their sounds and create. But you know what? We gotta give respect to the foundation, Mr. King Tubby, his proteges, scientist, King Jammy, big up Bunny Striker Lee, and these people, because, if you really delve deep into dub, and I know you have, you really see the parallels to modern drum and bass and jungle. A lot of the jungle guys say that, especially when Shaka died, a lot of the jungle guys were saying, what people don't realize is that the bass frequencies and the whole bass influence in jungle was stuff that they learned from Shaka over in the UK, and all of the early reggae sound systems. And I mean, all of those guys were going over there on a regular basis, and before jungle, I think a lot of people don't realize, like, it's like a lot of the jungle guys, they were in sound system. They were in reggae sound system. And we never, ever give sound system culture its due. That's the thing that irritates me the most. Jamaica was doing sound system in the late 50s. You know what I mean? With like Count Machuki as an MC, the whole idea of playing a record and then flipping it over. U-Roy was the first MC to make a record. I think it was like 67 or 68, where he was rapping over an instrumental. You know what I mean? And this was common at parties in Jamaica all throughout the early 60s, from ska to rocksteady onwards. You know what I mean? So we have to pay tribute. And I think that it's great. I know you stand on that because you're talking about doing a documentary to talk about the whole idea of drum and bass and the principles of dub. I think that that's really important because most people don't know. They weren't able to make the connection. It was like, oh, flip it over. Why does this have a dub mix? I started noticing it when I was buying house records, and only to find out that the idea of the dub mix, the stripping back and the mixing down, they did get that from Jamaica. You know what I mean? Some of the early, it was just they were making, and they were doing it with funk. Like Larry Levan was doing it with funk records. The whole idea of making the disco mix or the club mix, you know what I mean? So that was for DJs. So I think it's so super crucial. Tell me a little bit about that, because you've actually talked to me about this project before, that you wanted to do something talking about drum and bass and its origins.
Right. Well, it's more or less what I was just talking about there. It's the fact that drum and bass as a term goes way back to the days of 2-track recording, where you would have vocals, instruments on one track and drum and bass on the other. Yeah. So listen to some of the earliest dub albums, like, early 70s or even going into the 60s, you can hear all the instruments and vocals dip out and, echo off at the same time. Mm-hmm. That's an earmark of a 2-track mix. And to me that, I would really love to hear from some elder sound men, some veteran sound people on the subject, because I'm here born and raised in Scarborough. So to me, this is all I've read. Like I'm a huge fan of it, and I'll delve into as much of it as I can. I'll read as much of it as I can. I'll get as many records as I can.
And you'll piece it together the best you can. But
I was born in '76, and King apparently stopped mixing in '75. So we need someone who's really a bit more knowledgeable on the subject. So I'm piecing together what I have, and
I always tell people it's like we're coming from a Toronto perspective, even when I'm speaking on anything in Britain, and I respect that because I wasn't there. All I know about is the transitions and the things that happened while I was here and what was happening here, because I think a lot of people in the world don't realize that we had a massive massive scene. And there was things happening here simultaneously, and all of the English artists were coming here every week. So we built a friendship over like a 30-year period, you know, with like people like Frost and Brian G and GQ and all the MCs. And but it is very much our Toronto perspective. So and that's all it is a perspective, you know what I mean? So we don't claim to know it all or anything like that, but we do. That's what this is all about, is trying to piece things together, you know what I mean?
In a unique geographical position where we, most people in Toronto are not junglists, but there is a large amount of junglists in Toronto, and a lot of us are veterans who have witnessed it from before it existed, you know.
Yeah.
That's actually, I really love to see the Plady documentary. That really made me happy, but I was, a bit that they left out pretty much all of the jungle guys. I feel like there could be another full-length documentary just on the jungle side of it. Like, you were in it, but
I think for like 10 seconds. I think there was a maybe, and I mean, I think we did a 3-hour interview talking about the rave scene and everything that we were actually talking about here. But I did hear that their next project is supposed to be dance music oriented, because they realized when they did that, a lot of the comments, people were saying, well, you left out dance music, you left out rave. And I mean, I don't think documentaries can cover everything. It leads me to, you're a breakbeat connoisseur, right? And there's the Amen Brother documentary being put together. I think you've been interviewed for it. Am I correct in that?
Yeah. Really, that is going to be epic. That's going to be that's just so important. I can't even stress how important that is, and people don't realize it. When it's out, people will get it. But yeah.
Tell us a little bit about what you know about that project.
Right. So it's a project that's being done by the man called Proto J. So he has been a long time jungle fan as well from down in the States. He's got decades of jungleism under his belt. So he's a veteran in the field now. This is a project I understand that he's been doing for almost a decade now, but there's been a whole lot of bumps along the way. And, he's probably better to go into all of that. But it's coming to the point now where it's, I believe, near completion. And he's got interviews from like so many critical players. He's got all of the remaining people that were involved in the actual original recording and the original band.
Amazing.
And of GC Coleman. So it's all about GC Coleman, basically, more so than the Amen Break. He's the drummer that played the Amen Break. A lot of us, are aware of the reach of the Amen Break and the effect and the influence that it's had on music in general, just dance music and music in general.
Yeah.
This one is going to really take a close look at GC Coleman, the man. And it's, from what I've seen so far, it's extremely well done. So I personally can't wait to see it. Yeah.
It's really incredible to think about just what that break is, like the backbone of so many things, you know what I mean? And I mean, just its contribution to hip hop, but then even to the fact that every other week I'm using it over here in jungle, and that people are still experimenting with it and bringing new things to the table. Even the way that we use it when we don't use it. Sometimes we're just using the air and the hi-hats and EQing everything out. You could hear it in a lot of drum and bass where they just want that shimmer. So there's some magic in that session, you know what I mean? And I know you must feel the same way.
I feel like that special thing about the Amen Break, it's hard to put your finger on it, is the same special thing that they had going on, Bunny Lee had with the flying cymbals.
Yeah.
So it was right around the time that Tubby's studio was being put together. They had a bunch of flying cymbals tunes, and it turned out that was the perfect range of frequency to let the filter just cut loose and do all kinds of, the famous squawky filter on the high pass on the MCI mixer of King Tubby's there. Yeah. But to me, echoed so much in jungle and drum and bass with the Amen, because we use a lot of filters, a lot of those kind of, effects. And that Amen break has that same range and gives you that whole same, and it's like you can mold it, you know what I mean? There's just like so much more to work with.
And I think I'm firm in saying this. There's no other break that gives you the energy that the Amen break does give you. Even when people are using other breaks, they're trying to emulate the Amen break's energy. There's something so energetic about it. It's definitely a love affair for sure.
Even when you slow it right down, it's still got energy. It's like, even if you slow it down to a walking pace, it's like a real stomping pace.
Yeah. All right, so we're gonna kind of bring it up to when you started to make music, because I know that's been a really long journey, and that interests me because it's taken a lot of time for you to develop a sound, and with great success, and you've been reaping the rewards of your hard work now, because it's been a long road. Tell me about when you started and what that whole process was like.
Well, yeah, I kind of always wanted to make beats ever since I clocked that this was sampled music. Like, I think it was a Public Enemy record where it cuts to a live show and they go, "Bring that beat back." And he brings back the funky drummer, he plays the funky, and it clicked. At that point, it kind of clicked in. Wait, this is a James Brown song. Like, because my dad had showed me James Brown before. I recognized, and that stuff.
Mm-hmm.
From that point, I started really trying to understand and search out the break beats, because I could tell that there were some that were being used, over and over again. I'd say, like, right, that's the same beat in that song as it is in that song. So I'd try to find it out, So even in those times, I would, when I had, 12-inch record with a bit of an instrumental part, I would record it on a cassette and then try to make a loop out of it, and with no success at all. But I was frigging around with beats, more or less. I was trying to do something. I didn't know a 4-track cassette record. I didn't even know that existed. Otherwise, that would have been a different story. But so I always kind of had the bug. But hearing some of the jungle in 93, 94, I'm just like, this is so advanced. I wouldn't even know where to start with this. This is a lot of, there's some serious advancement going on in those times.
So, yeah. And I think that's why that music stands the test of time. You know what I mean? There's an argument I've seen people say, actually Clayton, big up, Renegade Hardware, but he basically said that, the other day he likes to post controversial things, and he was saying that the jungle of today that's being made can't compare to the jungle of yesteryear. Now, my opinion on that, he's not hearing enough of the right people, because there's some extremely advanced, incredible jungle being made. Now, I think we attach a lot of nostalgia to the original sound, but also too, I think even though we're making the same genre and using the same principles as the 94, 95, there's a lot of things that's changed. You know what I mean? I just think that I'm happy just to see that people are going forward with it. And people like yourself always like just innovating and bringing in new flavors. Even Kruger, like really, like artists like yourself, I put Kruger right there because he has this uniqueness about him. You know what I mean?
Oh yeah.
And there's so many people, like Mark Mack has been back and instrumental, and Stretch, everything he's doing with AKO. Obviously Equinox just never stopped, big up Bailey. They're doing their Drumworks thing. There's people who are really putting in work. Overshadow have, I guess, decided to really like be the boundary pushing label, and try to, I guess, take that whole Moving Shadow ethos, because Moving Shadow was like, we're going to be the future. So it's like, it's really interesting to see some of the jungle producers being like, okay, we're going to take this sound and now flip it and just really try to go somewhere else with it,
With Roughneck, Muffin, even yourself. I remember for a while there, you guys were trying to start a label called Dutty Records. I remember hearing it on the radio at the time.
Yeah.
I remember hearing a bunch of dubs, but I don't think it came to fruition. But the dubs were there. You guys were producing tunes. I know there was tunes being made. Hard Crew,
Yeah.
Hard Crew were making tunes to the point where they went over to London, UK, and rang up Busy B and connected with him and made tunes there at Brain Studios. And this was in '94.
Yeah.
So seeing that stuff from a a jungle fan, thinking, man, this is, this stuff is intense. There's no way I can make that. To seeing you guys, some of the hometown heroes making it. You know what I mean? Some of the dubs that I would hear on the Rinse Out show, somehow they never made it out. But I'm blown away how, because they were just as good as anything that came out. You know what I mean? Roughneck, I remember at one point had started a studio. It was called Murder One. And he'd mentioned on the radio that, so I'm going to be open for bookings, call up the number. So I called him up and said, I want to book some studio time. And it was in a transition time when he was moving studio to another location or something. So we didn't end up actually linking up. So, but I know Jesta and big up to Richie and big up to Jesta. I know that those two around that same time had also, I didn't know them at the time. They're my homies right now, but I didn't know them at the time. And this would have been, I guess, 95-ish or close to 96. They had touched base with Roughneck and they had actually made it down to a session and worked on some tunes with, they said PhD was there as well. Sometime later than that, maybe about a year later than that, I seen Slip and Slide Studios, and Slip I knew from Played a Record because he was a co-op student there for a while back in about 94. So I already had Slip, and when I seen Slip and Slide Studios, they were taking bookings. I rang him up and I said, I'm gonna book some time. So I went down, worked on some stuff with him for a bit. Yeah, big up the Slip, big up the Slide. I left a CD there at Slips and it had a Superman sample on it that he later did something with.
What? Okay.
Slip.
That's a little tidbit that the world didn't know.
Well, it's a small world, man. There's a lot of energy going around the crew in Toronto. I don't know, something going around in Toronto. Connections.
You know what? I think it was like we all had this passion for the music, and we tapped into the do-it-yourself approach that we noticed was happening, because you'd hear a lot of records and you'd be like, oh, you know what? You could just hear these guys are just trying something. You know what I mean? And we tapped into that, but we didn't have the infrastructure that was happening over in the UK. And here's something that I think a lot of people don't realize. The infrastructure that jungle and hardcore, especially when it comes to dub cutting and mastering and all of these things and creating a record, came straight out of a reggae and sound system culture. Because you had places like Music House, you had Leon, who were mastering jungle records like they would reggae records. And so you had this reggae dub aesthetic on a lot of the jungle records. You know what I mean? And it just was just coming over. And I think also too, down to the manufacturing, that whole machine, we didn't have it. So with Dusty Records and all of these things, even though we wanted to get all these projects out, we just didn't have that whole situation. We were mailing DATs to England, And I remember with Laza from the Hard Crew, he was so picky about his material. But, he did have his connection with Busy B, and he just let himself, he always thought he wasn't good enough because he was comparing himself to Dillinger and all these things. But he was making amazing music. But we just didn't have the whole infrastructure to follow through until many years later, when Slip and Slide and Vinyl Syndicate and L Double, we had our first opportunities with him. People who had a foot in the manufacturing and the distribution. So getting into your life in music production.
Right. So this would have been before the days of Vinyl Syndicate. So really what I wanted to make tunes. All I had myself was turntables and a mixer. So my first thing was I wanted to, get some studio time so I could try to make a tune. But my other mission was to find out what it is that I needed to, start up a home studio myself, because I didn't have any family really or any friends that were in music, on the musical side of things, to say, oh, here, point you in this direction. So that was a learning trip, as well as working on Beach Trip. I was also hanging out with Ilfingers a couple times at his place because he was within Bottom Line Crew. So a lot of times we end up back at his place, and he would show me his thing because he was making beats around that time as well.
Right.
So ultimately, I made my first tune with Alex Darkness.
Oh, okay. I remember him. Yeah.
He also had studio time, and he was really helpful showing me, just basic stuff, just to get the handles on,
Yeah, and he used to cut plates for us as well at Scratch Free Press. Yeah, I remember. So big up Alex,
Yep, Alex, yeah. So like when I'd, in high school, in grade 10, which would have been, 95, I think, they offered a course called Music and Computers.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I said, you know what? That's me right there. I'm gonna take that. I signed up for it, and the first day I went in, I said, all right, where's the sampler at? And, we don't got any samplers. We just teaching, extreme basics, and he was really just teaching how to do. It was still a lot more music than it was computers. He was teaching us blues progressions and stuff like that, but on MIDI.
Okay.
But I learned a bit from that, and it was like every little bit was stacking up. So around 1998, myself and D-Rail, who was another DJ within Bottom Line Crew, D-Rail, you done his podcast, yeah?
Yeah. Pick up Daryl, yeah.
So me and him decided we were gonna go half on a sampler. So we bought an EMU, an ESI 4000. But before I started using it, started getting familiar with it. I was reading the manual, and I was, learning it the long way, the hard way. And at that point, a friend of mine who I spent some time, it was like a New Year's Eve or something like that, where we brought turntables up, and he was like, bring records up, bring turntables, we'll have a jam. And he's like, we'll record the set. And he recorded it on his computer. And boom, and he had the waveform and everything. And I was like, hey, how did you do that? What do you, there's no sampler here around, nothing like this was, and he was a bit more wise about computers than I was. And he said, no, look, here's a program, SoundForge. There's an X program, this one. And to me, that was an eye opener. And he was a real good friend of mine too. So I could ask him as many questions as I needed. That was what really broke it open for me. And I really didn't use much of the actual ESI sampler after that.
Coming out of the 90s, I remember there was a very dominant tech step sound. And then in the early 2000s, you had digital and breakage and total science. This Rohan, what was his label again? Bassman. Basically, Loxy and Ink and Dylan, they all decided to make this sound, which was bringing back the jungle and hardcore again. Now, I know that definitely had an influence on you, because like whenever I talk to you, sometimes you're just like, yo, we never left, like you know what I mean, like you're certain guys like Equinox and stuff like that, it's like who stood firm in that sound, hence Mr. Stand Firm, you know what I mean, and you did, because you never left it. So but that rebirth for me, because I started to really delve into production around that time too, I was like, oh, this is it. This was jungle and hardcore again, with that new, obviously, drum and bass tempo. So tell me about your coming into that period. What were you doing around that time, and when did you start Stand Firm Radio?
Right. So I'd cut a few dub plates, and they weren't very good. But around that time was the Milanos times, around that era. And I met Gabe, who was another DJ. He was just DJ Gabriel at the time, later known as Gremlins. But he was another guy I became really friends with, and he was, I guess, pen pals or internet friends with. He was, with a lot of other producers. He would talk a lot to producers. Like I was pretty, introverted, or I just keep to myself for the most part. He was, out there chatting with DJs and producers. Every time they would come to town, they would at one point pass by his place. You'd see their signature up on the. You remember his room that had everyone's signature in it,
Yeah.
And at one point, me and him I'd showed him some of the music I was working on, and he then passed it on to Loxy, who played it on his radio show. And so big up to Loxy. He's actually the first UK, DJ to play any production of mine. And that would have been about 2005.
Yeah.
So, when someone like Loxy plays a tune of yours, that's like a bolt of electricity just like firing into your body right there. And that's like, you get hyped, you immediately double down. You're like, all right, that's inspiration. Loxy, was always a massive fan of Loxy. Them times they were calling him the Grim Reaper. Nowadays, there is a different guy. Big up to Tim Reaper. But in them days, Grim Reaper in them days, the Grim Reaper was Loxy, and his earliest productions were with Busy Bee as well, Brain Studios. So, I can't ever overstate the impact of Brain Studios. Brain Studios and Busy Bee in general, just like, that's near and dear to me personally.
Had a big impact on Equinox as well.
Oh, 100%. And this is it. Like, I find that most of the people that I'm connected with nowadays, it all goes back to either Brain Studios or Reinforced. So Gabe also sent some of my tunes to Indy and Dave, aka Mantra and Double O. They were liking them, and I'd spoken to them. Started to build a little friendship with them. I was sending them dubs. Double O was sending me a few dubs, and Double O is, depending on which day you're asking me, Double O is my favorite producer. I think he's the most underrated producer around there. He's like, I can't say enough good things about Double O, but
and the new album is wow,
it's a masterpiece if you ask me.
10 out of 10.
Yes, 100%. But I digress. So, from talking to them, being in touch and contact with them, they'd mentioned they were going to put together a little tour, thinking about passing by Toronto. They heard good things about Toronto and wanted to see if there was a show in Toronto. So, between Capro, Chris, and Wendy Hydra, and myself, we threw a show that had Double O Mantra, and so
I vaguely remember that.
It wasn't very well attended because a lot of people. Rupture was somewhat in its infancy then, and there was a lot of people hustling out there, jungle, and a lot of people's names were getting lost in the shuffle, but. Yeah. So it was the best attended show, but it was a solid crew of people there, and they had a radio show that had a lot of loyal listeners, Right. So so they played the show in Toronto, and I had them back at my place, so we were just chilling, working on some beats and stuff, and their next show on their tour dropped out on them. Instead of flying there for no show, they stayed in Toronto. So I ended up chilling with them for about another week, and we really got to know each other, and we worked on some tunes together, and like really became friends. And then I showed them some of the stuff I was working on, and they said, you could play at Rupture. You're ready to play at Rupture if you want. Think about that. So the next year we worked it out, and the next year, 2011. So this would have been 2010 when they played in Toronto. Mm-hmm. So early 2011, I went over to London to play for Rupture. On that same trip, I met Antidote, who was another internet friend of mine, who we bonded over beats because we were both label mates with Outsider. I linked up with him, and we became good friends. And he suggested to me, he was the manager at the time of Jungle Train. Mm-hmm. And he said, why don't you have a show? Like, why don't you do a radio show? You're over here DJing. Why don't you do a radio show? And he kind of wouldn't take no for an answer. I was like, nah, I don't know. I mean, he really wouldn't take no for an answer. And one thing led to another. Yeah, so I started doing a radio show, and I had to think of a name. So Stand Firm Hi-Fi, what I came up with, thinking that it was, I was eventually going to be a sound system. Hence the name Hi-Fi. It's ultimately going to be a sound system. So it's been a radio show on jungletrain.net for coming up to 13 years now. Originally, I wanted to do a night, and hence the sound system element of it. And that idea more or less changed into what we now know as Drumcraft.
Where did you guys get the name Drumcraft from, by the way? And what does it actually mean? Where did it come from?
Well, it's got dual meaning. It's like the crafting of drums. Like, it's not basic drums that you get when you come to one of our shows. You get specially crafted break beats. Drums are highly crafted. It's not regular drums. And the other way to look at it is that it's like a spaceship. It's like a craft. It's like literally a spacecraft, and you get on board.
You just released, is it an EP on Rupture?
Yeah, it's a four-track EP.
Tell me a little bit about that project and how it came about and how long it's been in the works and stuff.
So the Right Ingredients EP, so one of the tracks off there was initially meant to be on the Planet series, and it got moved around and didn't have a home, so it ended up on there, and that was Just a Dream. There's another tune on there called Island Cream, which is a collaboration between myself and Dodes, who's another long-time Toronto artist, producer, Aco Beats, representing, just general bad man. Big up to Ian, big up Dodes. Collabed on a bunch of tunes, and this one, it's called Island Cream. Named it after a local restaurant here to me in Borough 2. It's an island restaurant that sells ice cream too, so that's their name, Island Cream. Big up to Island Cream. Yeah, the other tunes on the EP is Raw Deal, which is kind of a deep drum cut, and then the main title tune is the Right Ingredient, which has a pretty big sample in it that I don't want to.
Yeah.
I don't know how that tune happened. I almost feel like I didn't produce it because it's just, I went to my local record shop just to dig. It was actually a pawn shop, the pawn shop next to the record shop. They had Creative Records, and I found a record that the cover looked good. They didn't have a listening station. The cover looked nice. I said, $5, all right, I'll take a chance.
Wow.
And every record is a sample pack if you're a beat head, if that's your life. So, going through it, one of the songs on it is just hitting the mark, and perfect BPM to, I just kind of sat down and tried to put a beat on it. And the next thing I know, it was done. It was almost like I tapped into a frequency, and then some other force took over and made the tune. And
it was meant to be. Yeah, man.
Different. It doesn't sound like something I would normally make, and it's gotten a good response. Big up to Mantra, who's championed it. She sent me a few videos of it going off in dances in various places, and just an ear-to-ear smile when I see those.
Yeah, man. So big up the Rupture crew, really carrying the flag for jungle and, hardcore, and that original sound, that breakbeat music. It can be tough. Like I was saying to Brad, it's like festival season just comes and you're I follow all these people, so my Instagram feed is just festival season, and it's like these big stadiums and you know what I mean? And then we have our tiny little jungle scenes. You know what I mean? And it's like, but the funny thing is, I was thinking about it the other day, my happiest place is in a tiny little room, right? With a red light, a big sound system, and good music. People will be surprised by this, but I would take a 254 session over a stadium. I know that I blow a lot of people's minds, but I really love that whole sound system dance, basement party, that intimacy, and just it being about the music and the bass. Something gets a little bit lost in a concert setting for me. It's not that I dislike playing to thousands of people or anything like that. You know what I mean? I've had a few moments, right? How do you feel about that? What's your perfect type of venue to play?
Yeah, I mean, I'm not really a festival DJ. I've never really been the one to play a lot of the bigger gigs, so I can't really compare. I can't really say. Most of the shows I do are what you described. Relatively smaller size gigs with, sound system quality over quantity. Just
that Rupture sound system, it did blow my mind. I was so impressed with Corsica.
Yeah, I'm a big fan of Room 2 there as well. Like I'd always played in Room 1 until last year. I played in Room 2, and I think the sound system there I might like it even better than Room 1. It's
Room 2. There was definitely, the OG jungle stuff and hardcore was going on in Room 2 a lot. So I found myself in Room 2 a lot that night. So a lot of people are going to wonder about your musical process and how your songs usually come together. When you're in the studio, do you have any rituals?
I pretty much go in on beats first thing in the morning. So I go in on beats when I have coffee in the morning. Mm-hmm. So I guess there you go, coffee. I think I take too much of a freestyle approach, and I make beats almost like just as a therapeutic thing, just as a thing to do. More often than not, there isn't an end goal, an end product. And that's one thing that Gabe helped me with, because I was just making beats that were basically loops, and he kind of said, listen, if you just finish a couple of these tunes, you could get out there. The tunes could get out there. So yeah, I do a lot of that where I'm just making beats that are just beats, and I'm not thinking of, well, this is going to be a tune that's in this style or this tune. Yeah, a lot of what I do is just chopping drums up. I think that's my forte. I'm not really musical. Yeah, I'm a herbsman, so I love to be under my herbs when I'm working on some tunes. As far as DAW goes, I use Reaper.
Okay.
Mostly because it's customizable. You could just make it how you want it. So I had been through Cube. I started with Cubasis, and then I was on Acid when it was Sonic Foundry, and then I used Logic for a while, and then I realized that none of those ones had everything. Each one of them was missing something, and then when I found Reaper, it could do everything that I was missing. So I was like, yeah, that's the one.
Do you have a piece of kit that you couldn't live without? Something that, you're like, this is something that you always gravitate toward, like even something that, you use for sub bass and so on?
Well, I'd say the Chaos Pad. I have a Chaos Pad there that's, I haven't used it much recently, but you could hear it in pretty much every tune that I've released at some point or another. I've used it.
You've been fortunate enough to be releasing on AKO, Rupture, and also on Metalheads. You've had a super, super productive year. Actually, when was the last time you were out in the UK?
That was last December.
Okay. Do you have any plans to return?
This December, yeah. I usually go around for the Rupture birthday, which is usually end of November.
Okay.
Last week of November, first week of December.
Who are some of the artists and some of your friends that you par with and that inspire you today? Because I know you're in that community, and you're a pretty central figure in the jungle community, in the drum funk community. So who are some of the guys that you're constantly riffing with? Obviously Double and Mantra you mentioned, but who are some of the other people that you're really linking with regularly? Yeah,
so like Double Mantra, I hold them in the highest regard. I'd say Equinox as well is another he's like a brother to me. We talk quite often. We got the whole Cywax crew. Dub One as well. I chat with Dub One, semi-frequently. Actually, I know Dub One from before I know Marlon or any of them. I know Dub One from MySpace days. I think I hit him up back in those days and been like, hey man, these tunes that you're making are I'm insane. And we remember we both discussed Cywax and how we were both big fans of Cywax, and we've been friends ever since then. So yeah, I got a lot of respect for Dub One. He makes some absolute killer tunes. I'd say Threshold as well. Coach Threshold is the correct terminology there, because
indeed
he's got a huge part to play in the Rumbleton sound, because from the first time I was over in London when I met him, we've been friends and always had a good back and forth, a good rapport, and he's quite intense, with his feelings and his opinions on things and his musical theories and ideas. And I don't want any yes men really around me. I want to hear the real cold hard truth. I mean, it goes even past music. He's one of the only people I'm properly able to discuss things like race with. You know what I mean? It's not an easy topic to discuss,
Yeah. I mean, so much has happened, especially in the last couple of years. Like, we're sort of post-pandemic now, post George Floyd, post little black. Everyone was making their picture black, and right. all this stuff was supposed to change, and from my perspective personally, I don't see it. A lot of people said they were going to make a lot of changes, and you know what I mean? Yeah, some people have, but I think we have a far way to go. You know what I mean?
Oh, no doubt. It's crazy times we live in, and
yeah, it's inflation. Yeah. It's inflation as well. We're in a tough times, and at the end of the day, DJing is a business, and it's. But then you've got your companies like Drumcraft and Rupture, and what we're trying to do over at Inner City Dance, where it is just focusing on our sounds, on our music first, everything else after. You know what I mean? I just wish some of the bigger entities would look at things that way. You know what I mean? But yeah, it's an interesting time. We're in this kind of it's a very social media driven, very money driven time. But that's why I think this, I don't like to call it new, but I think this niche, an underground scene that we're a part of, it's music first. Do you know what I mean? And it's not to say that everybody doesn't want to have a successful party, because you know what? When you're doing something on the level of Rupture, you have to make money. They have a family, and you put so much time and effort into it. You want it to be successful. So it's good to see that they're getting so much success, and looking at like the new Cool FM and how it's really married the scene. Like there's Rupture's on there. You got Brian G on there. You got so many different people on there pushing the whole sound. You know what I mean? Is there anybody else you want to shout out?
Big up to Due Diligence and Jenny Jen. Yeah. That's our family right there. That's my brother and sister right there. Enough love for Frank and Jenny. I gotta say big up to Antidote, R.I.P. Antidote. He always had my back. I miss him badly. He's one of the best guys I ever met, as far as lifers of this jungle game, and like seriously devoted people to the drum and bass jungle game. And this game is the wrong word. It's life. It's not. There's no playing around. It's the life of just.
It's serious business, man. I mean, we spend a lot of time. We dedicate a lot of our time and energy. And you know what? It's, balancing family and work and all of these things. So you know what? I have to salute you, because you know what? We're super proud of you, man. Like, even people that are outside of, our scene, look at what you've achieved over the last couple of years and what Drumcraft's done. And I know everyone's super, super proud of what you've done. And I know that I am. I could say it to you, you know what I mean? Like, to take it to a higher level is like, you've just crafted your own sound. Like, some of the things I listen to, the way that you've kind of like taken dub and breakbeats and just merged them together with an aesthetic that's just so unique to you, man, salute, hats off, you know what I mean?
Thank you. Hey, you know what? I mean, it's the same for all of people who are around, who've been in this for 30 years, like yourself. There's actually not that many of us in Toronto, but shouts to Lush, shouts to Gabe, shouts to Frankie Guns, 30-year veterans. They need to be appreciated.
Yeah, man. I appreciate that. Big up Jesta. We didn't forget you. I know, when you start shouting out people, you know what I mean? Listen, all of our fam, we love you. You know what I mean? So nobody's getting left out here. But you know what? We got to do this more often, man. Like, we're not going to be able to wrap everything up in a minute, but I hope we're not strangers. You know what? You got a Mr. Officer remix coming for us. Yeah, big up Dodds. He just did a remix for Vibe in 885. So what do you have coming down the pipeline in the next few months?
Well, so September 1st is the release of the Bright Ingredients EP on Rupture London. It's up for pre-order right now. As of tomorrow, I don't know when this is going to go live. As of the 18th of August, they're going to release Just a Dream to the pre-order buyers. But every other track will be available September 1st. Yeah, so that's the big EP. After that, I have some special news that I can't disclose at this moment in time.
Okay.
Safe to say that is one of my top favorite labels of all time. One that I regard with like absolute utmost respect. So yeah.
I want to thank you so much for doing this. I really appreciate it. And you know what? We got to stay in touch, and I need that Rupture EP.
No doubt.
Also, producers, get at me, djmarcusvisionary@gmail.com.